setting it up. I think we're going to meet with healthcare, the healthcare insurers, the insurance companies. So what I'm asking for in healthcare is very simple. Obamacare is with healthcare, the healthcare insurers, the insurance companies. So what I'm asking for in healthcare is very simple. Obamacare is a disaster. I call it the Unaffordable Care Act. Unaffordable as opposed to, it's unaffordable. They're going to have a tremendous increase in premiums, which is Obamacare, which is them, the Democrats' fault. They'll try and blame Republicans. It has nothing to do with us. It's the Democrats' fault. What I want to do is we spend hundreds of billions of dollars a year that go to insurance companies. I want that money to go to the people and let the people buy their own health care. And everybody loves it. It's become our issue. Now, before I do that, I'll meet with the insurance companies, just as I met with the drug companies. As you know, we're meeting with 4 other drug companies, Johnson & Johnson, but they've all agreed. We're meeting with them this week. It's coming. It'll be a similar meeting. They've all agreed. But nobody would have thought the drug companies were going to do what they did, where they're giving away free drugs. They've been so great, okay? And we have most favored nations. Nobody thought that was possible. I don't think any other president ever tried to get it because they never thought they could. But with respect to the insurance companies, I want to meet. There's essentially 14 of them, 10 big, but there's a total of 14 pretty much, pretty big. And I want to meet with them, and I want to say, I want you to cut your rates way down, way down. And maybe if they do that, we'll be able to not cut them out. We'll be able to continue to deal with them, which is probably a little easier process. I think the best process is pay the money directly to the people, let them buy their own health care. But I'm going to meet with them the first week back. I do it now, but they're trying to come up with a schedule. They want to meet badly, they've told me, but they want to come up with a schedule. I said, make it a good schedule. Your rates have to come way down. We're also going to meet with other insurance companies because under Biden, the insurance rates have gone through the roof.
So that is very interesting. And that's, I don't know how we say it. That's very, very different. Um, and so that's one. And then I want to play something else and then I'll react to it.
For them to allies or to ourselves. It takes too long. The only way they're going to be able to deliver them is if they build new plants. They don't want to build new plants because that's expensive. So we're going to be discussing production schedules. We're going to be discussing CapEx spending. We'll be discussing the pay to executives where they're making $45 and $50 million a year and not being able to build quickly. They're going to make that kind of money. They have to build quickly. Again, we make the best equipment in the world, but they don't make them fast enough. And we're going to be also discussing dividends. We want the dividends to go into the creation of production facilities. So we'll be talking about all CapEx, dividends, and the pay. We're also going to be talking about buybacks. They spend so much money on buybacks. They want to buy back their stock. I don't want them to buy back their stock. I want them to put the money in plant and equipment so they can build these planes fast, rapidly, like immediately. I mean, I have sold more planes than any president by far, times probably 20. So every time I go someplace, I sell 100 planes. That includes commercial planes.
Okay. That's all right. There's a theme here. So hold with me, bear with.
On housing, you talked in your address last night about housing.
Yeah.
Are you still considering a national emergency over housing?
I'm looking at it.
What would
yeah,
that look
I'm
like?
looking
What would
at
that
it.
mobilize?
You know, there's two thoughts on housing. You have a lot of people have housing that because we have such a strong time and such a strong market, their houses are very valuable. It's a big part of their net worth, their house. I don't want to knock those numbers down because I want them to continue to have a big value for their house. At the same time, I want to make it possible for young people out there and other people to buy housing. In a way, they're at conflict. In other words, you create a lot of housing all of a sudden, and it drives the housing prices down. So I want to take care of the people that have houses that have a value to the house that they never thought possible, that have sort of made them wealthy and happy, and especially in their later years. Got to be careful with that. I want to keep them up. At the same time, I want to make it possible for people to go buy houses. Daniel, please.
Wow. 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 And wow. So what we have here is a clear example of some of the internal conflict that even the president of the United States is having with the system. Okay? Make no mistake about it. There's going to be a lot of commentary, and you're going to have a lot of very foolish, conniving, grifting people who are going to talk about these subjects. But let me say it very bluntly, okay? This is why I like the terms marks and markets. All right? This is a conflict that even the president of the United States is having internally. Because on the one hand, he realizes his instinct is a lot closer to China and Russia. Even though he's a builder, right, in real estate. Okay, they do building in China and Russia. Lots of it. They're doing a lot of it in North Korea now too, by the way. But that's a whole other subject. His instinct is build. His instinct is growth. And I know he's part of the second power structure, and I can talk about the Division and Ruling Class, a great book by Caleb Maupin, where he gets into the details about these different power structures, the two major ones that are controlling the West. And he's part of the second one, right? He's part of the one that's the pro-growth, low interest rates, build, drill, all that stuff, right? But there's something else going on here too, and that is his instinct is for him to be popular, for him to have a great legacy. He wants to build infrastructure, he says. I'm not saying he's accomplishing it. I'm not saying his administration is going about anything the right way. But I'm saying what he says to draw the claps, and what I believe his gut is build, right? Let's build a lot of houses. Put my name on the side of them. Let's talk to the drug companies. Let's talk to the insurance companies. Let's talk to Con Ed. Remember he said when he had Mamdani in the White House, how he made the comment, well, we're going to talk to Con Ed because I'm sending them cheap energy and the people's bills are still high. Now, all these things sound great, right? The golden share. I've talked about this on this channel a lot, how he adopted the term from China, the golden share, for taking 10% of Intel and other companies. But there's something else going on here. This is a conflict that the President of the United States is having. The chief executive officer of the free market, capitalist, Western, liberal democracy, constitutional republic of the United States of America. This man is the guy who's supposed to lead the charge, and he is questioning the system. When he wants to get something done, he's stepping outside of the capitalist system. And there are a lot of people on this platform and on YouTube and in regular life who work for, whether they work in media or not, who hate to think that way. But it's the truth. I am not bending myself into a pretzel to defend anything. I am just telling you the truth. The truth is that the president, when he says, I'm going to talk to Con Ed, okay, about how much they're charging, that's not capitalism. When he says, I'm going to talk to the healthcare insurance companies and the auto insurance companies about how much money they're making, that's not capitalism. When he says, I have to think about housing and whether building a lot of housing will mess up the equity and the value of people's portfolios, my boomer friends, or help young people by just forcing the building of lots of housing to offset the price, well, that's a conflict of capitalism, okay? And we could talk about poverty of abundance in a moment, and I've had this conversation last night with a friend of mine who had never heard that term before, but we'll talk about that. But that's a conflict, right? When he says that there's an issue with how much money an executive is making at a defense contractor, and that yet they're not turning around and spending their money on development and infrastructure, like building new factories, hiring more people. He has a problem with that. Why? Because these defense contractors, 99.9% of their income comes from the federal government. And the federal government doesn't make money. The federal government borrows money and taxes. So all the money, and by the way, when they borrow it on the backs of you. So you could have a terrible credit score, right? Just think about this logic for a second. This is the system at play. You could have a terrible credit score individually, right? And it could be because you just don't make a lot of money. You've had to use credit to get by, and now you're just up against the wall, right? You don't have the leverage. You don't have assets. You don't have any big bonuses. You're never getting ahead of inflation. So you're just falling farther and farther and farther into debt, right? You can never get ahead. This is the reality for the majority of Americans, okay? You can have that credit score, and because of that, and even if you had a good credit score, either way, you can't afford a new car, you can't afford a house, you're struggling to get your whatever medical care you need, you're struggling for your pills, you're struggling for anything that's going on in your life, you're struggling, right? But yet, at the same time, the highest bank in the country, which is owned by private institutions, both domestic and overseas, they will use you as credit in order to lend the government money. So let me say that again. The private bank, okay, which is owned by other private banks that are involved in all the institutional lending in the whole country, the same businesses and people and the same money that is rejected to you because you individually are not worth anything to them, because you are struggling to get by in their system, because the debt that's being created every time a dollar is printed is putting you farther behind the eight ball because of monetary inflation, etc., etc. You individually, you can't get that loan to get that house. You can't get that loan to get that car. And frankly, you shouldn't even have to, because things are overpriced, overfinancialized. But you can be used as collateral so that the government can get that money, so that the government can get a contract to then take the cash and give it to a defense contractor, so that the government can give it to a friend of a senator to build a new building in D.C. This is how the system works. You're collateral for projects and business and horrible things like giving weapons to terrorists and giving weapons to other governments, or sending aid packages to Israel that has no debt, or sending money to other countries to give to the rich people in those countries like Ukraine, or to fund wars, etc. You're used as collateral because when they borrow, how are they borrowing? How is the government borrowing money? They're borrowing it against the backs of the taxpayer. So you're collateral in a terrible system that you don't benefit from, but you can't get access to that money. You can't get access to that prime rate. Not even close. That's how messed up the system is. And the president is saying, well, if we're going to give them this money, if we're going to give a defense contractor that makes all its money from us, the government, which is the taxpayer, then you got to build something. You have to hire people. You have to show that your expenditures are going to tangible things. You can't just buy back stock and pay your executives $50 million. Well, I think I agree with that sentiment, but here's the problem. What you're saying is that capitalism doesn't work, because that's capitalism. In capitalism, these defense contractors, they have a right to spend their money however they want. Their job is to maximize profit. Okay? So if the board of directors says, you know what, the CEO did a good job getting us another $1 trillion deal from the taxpayers, then you know what, we'll give him $50 million. Who cares? It's not my money anyway, right? Well, the average taxpayer doesn't like to hear that, but that's capitalism. So for the president of the United States to be calling that out, he is questioning the system. He will never say, I'm questioning the system, but that's what he's doing because he's challenging the system at play. He's saying it doesn't work because he has to step in and talk to them about how much money they're spending on their CEOs versus how much they're spending on expenditures like building factories. Well, wait a second. That's not your business, Mr. President. You're the president of the United States. You're not the president of these companies. You used to be CEO of Trump International. How would you feel if President Bush or President Clinton or President Obama or President Reagan had come in and said, hey, you're getting paid too much money and, you built the post office for the U.S. government, but you're getting paid too much money. The board of directors shouldn't have approved your bonus package. He would have been annoyed to hear that. But here's the thing. He's president and he's saying he's going to do that because he's admitting the system doesn't work. That $40-50 million aid package or that $40-50 million bonus or whatever is being paid to CEOs, he doesn't like it because he wants to see the money that is being generated through borrowing and taxation going to something tangible so that the people can say that they're getting something out of this deal. So he's questioning the system. If he's going to go to the health insurance companies and the car insurance companies and say, you guys are making record profits and people are struggling, well, he can say that, but the reality is you telling them what to charge, that's not capitalism. You telling the drug companies you did a good thing by agreeing to cap your drug prices at X and you'll go direct to the consumer and all of a sudden, well, wait a second. That's not your job as president. You are changing the nature of the relationship between the government and the private sector, which again, I'm not saying that concept is wrong. I actually think that's a good idea. But the problem is what you're admitting is that the system doesn't work. That's what you're admitting. And you can't be half pregnant. You're either pregnant or you're not. You're not half pregnant. And it looks like our president is starting to wonder if we want to be pregnant or not, because it seems like we're a little half pregnant. This is a landmark change in the way that the private and public sector interact. And the reason that it's not being picked up by the media and by other entities and people is because A, they don't want to question the system, and B, President Trump says a lot of things. And because he says so many things, at some point it becomes white noise. And people don't hear it because they just think, he's just saying stuff. He is fundamentally questioning the system. Okay? He is fundamentally questioning the system. Even the fact that he's saying, you know what, I got to protect my boomer friends by not building too many houses, because if I build too many houses, it's going to drop the asset value of their portfolio, which they rely on to live in their later years, because if I build a lot of houses, the value of their property will come down. Well, first of all, that's the president micromanaging the economy, which is not the job in the capitalist system, okay? And technically, it's not constitutional. So that's part of it. But the other part is the president of the United States sitting there debating out loud whether the system works or not, because he's like, well, on the other hand, I have young people that want to buy homes, and I have to decide if I want them to be able to buy homes, I have to get them cheaper housing, and I can do that by building a lot. Well, there's a couple things here. Number one, that debate is him questioning the system. That's it. First of all, it's a huge tell that he's admitting that he and his cohorts want to protect people with assets, right? Because that's who they value, right? If you don't have a lot of money, they don't value you. So that's part of it. But and for people who are going to say, well, you see, he's a real estate guy, and that's why he reacted that way. Yeah, I agree. He's a real estate guy. That's how he thinks. And they'll say, well, he doesn't want to have a challenge to his asset value. Like, that part I disagree with, because you're not building Trump Towers and Mar-a-Lagos. You're talking about building 2, 3, or 3-bedroom housing. That's not the same thing as building Mar-a-Lago. right? So it's not a challenge to him. It's a challenge to middle income, boomers who bought their houses for 100 grand or whatever, and it's paid off and they just pay property tax. And now, he's gonna challenge BlackRock because BlackRock bought up a ton of housing and then they resell a couple of the houses in every neighborhood back to themselves for triple the price. And when they do that, it drives up the property value of all the other houses in the area, right? Which then adds to their portfolio and also makes the neighborhood unaffordable for the next generation that wants to buy a house. So if Trump builds a lot of new houses that BlackRock does not get to buy, then he's challenging some of the institutional money on Wall Street that he doesn't want to necessarily screw with because they were donors to his campaign. So that's another part of this market and Mark's conversation that the president is weighing out loud. So you have to think about that for a second. What BlackRock, and they're not the only ones, but what these institutional buyers are figuring out is if they buy up enough property in a neighborhood that they control a good chunk or a whole of a neighborhood, if they just turn around and sell one or two of those houses back to themselves, and they do it at a higher price, what happens? The value of all the neighborhood goes up because suddenly you're selling a house on the block for, if all the houses were bought at $300,000 and you're selling 5 of these houses at $700,000, you're now raising the property value of all the other houses, right? So if Trump comes in and he just starts building Trump houses, which are 3-bedroom houses, very basic, whatever, he builds 3-bedroom houses and they all are selling at 150, 200 grand because Trump is pushing low rates and he's pushing mass housing. What happens to BlackRock's investment? It takes a hit because now the inflation in assets that BlackRock just created goes the other way because now a bunch of houses will be selling for less money. They're going to be selling for under the value that even BlackRock bought it at. So that's the challenge. He would be going up against not the Mar-a-Lago holders, not those individual places like that, but he'd be going up against the institutional money that is heavily invested now in real estate, and that's a challenge and something out loud that he's worried about. Again, there's 2 problems here. One, what BlackRock is doing is capitalism, right? But it's the nasty part of capitalism. It's the part of capitalism that Americans don't want to admit and many people don't want to talk about. Number 2, and it's not just BlackRock. I'm not picking on them, okay? I don't think they're doing anything wrong or illegal. They're smart. What they're doing is the system, but the system doesn't work. What Trump is also saying is the system doesn't work because he is challenging out loud whether he can do that or not. He is challenging out loud if I want to purposely attack asset prices of people that hold assets. And he's not just talking about boomers. He's talking about the institutional money. So you have the President of the United States in multiple instances in the course of a few days out loud questioning the system. This is unheard of. And you can say, well, FDR and all this. Well, a little different, okay? A little different situation there. FDR leveraged the support that he got from the former Trotskyites and some of the communists. He leveraged that support before the war, during the Depression. He leveraged that support for his political gain, and he expanded on what Hoover had started. And this was not the same as a president who had built a multilateral coalition. Okay, FDR's coalition didn't look like Trump's. Okay, now Trump is a big fan of FDR, so there's part of him in his gut that is reacting this way. But Trump is not copying FDR because he's in a different situation. He is publicly questioning the system. Okay, he is publicly questioning the system, and this is really unheard of for a president. Very much. I mean, if you listen to Reagan and Clinton and Bush and Obama, Biden, he didn't really talk like that. Even Trump in his first term. I mean, this kind of talk is very rare. And I think it's good as a conversational piece because it's making people ask the right questions. And this is why it's not as simple as Orange Man bad, because this is a very deep thing that's going on here. And it comes out in little tidbits over different clips, but it's very powerful. The President of the United States, the leader of this system, is questioning the system. So my question for you is, have you questioned the system? And what is your solution? Like and subscribe for more. Thank you very much.